communications challenges that you're facing, and why do you think communications is essential or important to your longer term success? And Lisa, I'm wondering if maybe you could help facilitate this with the folks on the call. I'd love to just hear some of the feedback from everyone here.
Okay, great. So you'd want the feedback from the questions here. What are some of the business or communication challenges that you're facing? So either individuals could raise their hands or they could type in the message box and we'll be able to respond to them. So what are some of the business or communication challenges that you're facing? Okay, so we saw from Wendy Walsh how to continue an online presence without seeming like we're marketing. Okay. Any hands? Anyone wants to raise their hand so that they could speak as well?
I'm not sure.
Hi, Simon.
Raise my hand. Hello?
Oh, someone just met. Yes, Lassa?
Hi, so for me, it is pivoting from a hotel, which is very difficult to function right now, into something that is maybe more long-term rental units, or seeing any other areas we can pivot into. And then, of course, being able to communicate and market that to our customers.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing, Lassa. We also saw on the chat that Maxine mentioned getting through all the noise of COVID-19 stories that are dominating. Tawana mentioned that she represents a mall and they still want to remain relevant while speaking to persons online. Brenton also mentioned low open rates for emails in our market, which is the insurance market. Mm-hmm. Is there anyone else who wanted to contribute to this question? Okay.
Well, I think this is great and it's helpful insight, and certainly if there are any other comments as we go, please, yeah, managing messages from multiple platforms, I can totally relate to that. So just keep I just encourage as we go along, if you have any questions, I'll keep an eye on the Zoom chat, and just welcome this feedback here because it is helpful in terms of topics to touch on. But yeah, I mean, from questions around how do you adapt your business? The hotel industry right now is being crushed by this pandemic, as well as tourism in general. How do you stand out when there is so much over communication and misinformation and disinformation out there? How do you have your message stand out? And I think one of the first comments was like, how do you communicate and continue your online presence without seeming like you're marketing with, you know, it's a taste question. What's appropriate right now? How do we communicate with our audiences in a way that acknowledges like we're in this terrible situation and we're not trying to sell you right now. What we're trying to do is be a helpful resource. So these are all critical questions that I think we're all grappling with, no matter what sector, business, company, or organization that we work for. And I think this is just an indicator of what this is. We're going to be learning a lot over the next several weeks about who we are as organizations and what we can offer our audiences and our customers. So with that, I wrote down a couple ideas in terms of why I think it's a benefit to keep communications open through a crisis. The first and most important piece to me is communications. We often think about it as me talking to you, but really the most important thing about communications is you listening to your audience. And so this is really an opportunity to learn from your audience, understand what their unique needs are, and identify how you and your core business or your core mission can serve. There's no bigger moment to serve than in a crisis. And I feel like the number one thing we can do through communications is to listen. Other benefits that I see, you know, it's an opportunity to improve resilience. If you know what your community is facing, if you know the challenges that will be persisting through, you know, through the end of this crisis, it provides you with an opportunity to be able to get back with the program, restart everything once everything is back in motion again. So you will have a better pulse on everything that's happening, and therefore you'll be able to jumpstart your businesses and your organization, your mission, once the world hopefully returns to somewhat normal. No matter how big or small your mission, no matter how big or small your product, communicating with your audience is critical in just the sense of providing clarity. There is so much confusion and misinformation out there. If you can provide someone with one moment of clarity when they are looking for information about you, you have done a service to others. And that, I have felt that even going to the grocery store and it's closed, you know, just a small moment like that where you just wish there was more communication around that, it changes your whole day and your whole perspective of what's happening in the world. So it provides stability for people, and that's significant, especially now. A few other things, in communicating, you're demonstrating your common humanity with others. You're acknowledging that you hear others, and that you are yourselves struggling through this or trying to figure out what your lane is and what your role is, and that we're all in this struggle together. Separately, that builds loyalty, that builds goodwill, participating in a way that is authentic to who you are and who your business is. Ultimately, I think builds trust in a brand, and trust is everything at the end of the day when it comes to communications. So moving along, I'm going to dive into some of the best practices and why I'm combining communications, content, and social media all together here is because these fundamentals are essential no matter how you're communicating, whether that's through social media on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Yelp, YouTube, whatnot. Or if you are you're sending email communications, or it's one-on-one personal outreach. No matter what, effective communications, these principles are essential to just carry forward in your day-to-day, and you can pick the most strategic platform and mechanism for communicating following that. So I think a crisis, this is my big take-home point, a crisis is your opportunity to get back to your core business, your core mission. Be true to who you are, your look and feel, and your values. And what we found at the Clinton Foundation through this crisis is we are coming back to the very basics of who we are and trying to find how can we be uniquely helpful? How can we uniquely serve others through this moment? And that has been a driving force in everything we've been doing. And I'll touch on that a little bit more later on in this presentation. But I really feel like before you dive into communicating with others, take a moment to reflect upon what makes your business unique and how can you uniquely serve others during this time. I've talked about the importance of listening, ask questions, learn the concerns, maybe issue a survey through a free app like SurveyMonkey, and really understand the needs of your audience. Or maybe it's just a question that you post on Facebook or a poll you post on Twitter. Wherever you're communicating, ask questions, just learn. I talked a little bit about this earlier, be human. Addressing what people are feeling, what you're feeling, the challenges that they or you are facing, builds trust, as I mentioned before, and be brief. As we know, as we alluded to in that initial question, people are inundated right now with information. So establish what your message is and be quick about it. Be quick about it and be consistent. Additionally, I'd say lead with facts. If you're communicating anything about this crisis, you have a responsibility to not only lead with clear information, but with accurate information. And there is so much fear right now that is being spread. My challenge and the focus that we've brought to our channels is how do we make sure that we're lifting up stories that are evidence-based, factual, and inspire hope, that we're not just promoting and promulgating fearful stories that at the end of the day can really harm a lot of people. I mentioned this before, just being consistent. Once you've established what makes you unique and what you want to communicate, be consistent in how you're communicating with your audiences. So a big part about that is setting a schedule to regularly communicate. And for us, that's a weekly spreadsheet. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And each day we figure out, okay, what goes on Facebook? What goes on Twitter? Are we emailing someone today? Are we sharing something on LinkedIn today? How are we activating our various audiences? Consistency is incredibly important. And then finally, focus on promoting action. We are all stuck at home trying to figure out how can we be helpful in this new reality. People want things to do. So whether that's supporting, being part of a PSA campaign that, maybe there's a Dominica campaign that's being run right now that your business wants to be a part of, or maybe it's donating to something, or maybe it's helping to deliver meals, or whatever it's going to be. Focusing on what people can do is a very empowering message that builds trust, builds empathy, and ultimately, I think, builds credibility for a brand. So I'll just touch on some key tactics and tools that I think are extraordinarily helpful when you're working to maintain a meaningful connection with your target audience, even when you're not engaging with them in the way you might always have previously engaged with them. The first and most important piece in anything is to create a plan. A lot of people start out communicating just by doing, and that might work for a little bit, but ultimately we all are feeling this. There is so much information out there. I think there's actually recent data that shows people are trusting social media less and less and turning to mainstream media, news, CNN, whatnot, more and more. And so understanding where your audience is the most critical, and setting a plan to reach them and keeping a focus on who your audience is at the end of the day, that is the most essential thing you can do. And then I've said this before, but asking yourself how can you and should you be adapting your model and your services to meet the unique needs of your audience. I'm just going to check the chat real quick because I see a couple things.
Yes, we had a message from Valda, and then from Lynn as well as Maxine.
Yep. So we'll touch on that. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep going, and we can talk a little bit more if you're brand new to creating an online presence. We can talk about some best practices or specific questions around that at the conclusion here. But things to consider before you start your system of communications, I would say, out of there. Identify your audience. Who is your customer? Who are you really trying to reach? What is the purpose of your communications? What are competitors or comparable organizations doing or communicating that can be an example for you? What is your main message? How do you want to get that across? And we'll talk about that just in a second. And how will you know if you're successful? So you can pick your platforms. We know, I don't know how many people here have a website or a website that they can work from, but it's very easy to build a website. Places like Square, there are a bunch of tools that help you build a pretty user-friendly, understandable website experience. And so if you're picking whether or not you should have a website, should you use email marketing? A lot of us, as we're experiencing right now, we have turned to virtual conferencing to host our major convenings or events. And that is a very adaptable model. Social media, we know Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and there's so many, Snapchat. There are just so many social media platforms that you can find your footing on. Consumer networks. I bet some people on this call are really focused on TripAdvisor or Yelp. Those can be incredibly impactful. And then we think about earned media and advertising, all of which have a space in this communications ecosystem. A few words about picking your platform. Facebook is where I'm sure everyone on this call is at least familiar in theory with Facebook. It's where people connect with other people and brands. And you can see here, visuals are key. Instagram, where people are finding compelling photos, videos, and live video. Twitter is where people are finding trends and opinions and breaking news in real time. LinkedIn are where people connect professionally. A blog is where you can share longer form stories that might require a little bit more time to dive into and to understand. And email, we all know email, surprisingly, it continues to be the most reliable way to actually reach someone with your message. Across all these, you can see visuals are incredibly key. In managing social platforms, it's incredibly important, I mentioned this before, incredibly important to have a calendar. It can look like this. We keep ours in a Google Doc, and we update it on a daily basis, and we literally strike it out as we post everything that goes live on our channels. And I think this is probably the most important thing for those of you who are already posting on social and need a system for scheduling out or monitoring the data or monitoring the trends. Hootsuite is an incredibly powerful tool for that, and it can help you post across platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatnot. And it's a free tool that we've previously used, and I highly recommend. Canva. Canva is a go-to tool for me and some of my other non-Clinton Foundation related work. It's a design template that you can use that you can size designs for any platform. Every platform is super specific and they all have different visual requirements. So Canva helps you navigate those requirements and adapt accordingly. MailChimp is an incredible tool for email marketing and being able to track your data. Once you send out an email, how many people are opening it, how many people are clicking through. MailChimp can give you essential data like that. SlidesGo, if you're creating a presentation for a virtual webinar, SlidesGo, it's how I created this presentation today. It provides incredibly helpful templates that are beautifully designed and can be adapted to your brand. Medium is a blogging platform that we use at the foundation. It's very easy to use and very interactive for the user. And for general tips and tricks around social media and how to navigate any question, I always recommend HubSpot. They have incredibly helpful content. So with that, I'm going to transition to some businesses and brands that have inspired us, even from home. And then I'll talk through what we're doing at the Clinton Foundation and open up for questions. So I'm just going to provide examples from things that I've seen on social media that have really inspired us. A CGI Action Network partner, Direct Relief, has been incredibly inspiring. We know that this work, this moment is made for their mission. They are around the world. And they're bringing that to life. They're bringing their mission to our mobile devices. And you can see that in this Instagram post where they're literally showing the equipment that they were able to deliver, helping on a procedure right here. And that's just a really beautiful thing and a way to feature real stories, real people, and drive home real empathy and a real message. Charity Water, someone had raised at the start, it's tough right now to continue your communications without feeling like you're marketing, like without feeling inauthentic. And what Charity Water has done here is connect their mission, which is to get fresh water to people around the globe, to this idea around hand washing. And that's not a natural, it's not like a natural fit for Charity Water to be communicating around this, but it works for this moment. And they're showing and demonstrating how their mission fits in. And I'm sure that took a tactical and strategic conversation among their leadership to identify how will we uniquely be helpful, and you can see that reflected on their communications. Sesame Street is one of my favorite brands. I adore following them, and how they've adapted is every Muppeteer is at home shooting content from their home, like a virtual presentation just like this, and they're sharing these really great reminders, really great videos, and really great supports for parents. NYC Healthy, we've been following since the very beginning of this outbreak, and they've been tremendously helpful in sharing evidence-based information that stands out and that you can trust. And we know when we go to NYC Healthy, that information is extraordinarily trustworthy, and we seek to lift it up. We've lifted this up several times throughout this pandemic. Email communication. What I like about Delta is they are continuing to communicate with us. Sorry, that's my dog. Happy, come here. They continue to communicate with us. I receive an email every other day saying something that is consistent with their message and what they're doing as a company to keep people safe. I also, from a small business perspective, I didn't think that my dog trainer that there was a way for her to adapt in this environment, but she's doing a virtual membership now for dog training. It clearly hasn't worked because my dog is barking during this call, but she's offering clear guidance and advice and ways to engage with her during this time when usually a dog trainer comes into your home, they're right there with you, they're helping you out. She's adapting her model, and that's tremendous. And she emailed about virtual membership. JP Morgan Chase released their annual report during this crazy time that it's shocking that anyone would release their annual report, but they don't do it without context. They, in their main message, they have a clear spokesperson and a clear message around how you respond to COVID-19 or what they're doing to help their shareholders, that's essential. And then finally, another small business I thought I'd highlight. My child goes to this wonderful class called Ramblin' Dan, and it's this great experience in person, but Ramblin' Dan has now adapted his model, and he offers free classes to everyone, and you can choose to pay him if you want, which is just, it's both gracious, it's building goodwill, and I think he's reaching many, many more people as a result. And then finally, we love the work of Everytown. This is not a moment for discussion. It's not the moment for discussion around gun violence, and yet they are still finding ways to make their mission count and bring their mission to the world. So I added that on there because I just think it's important. Your mission can continue, albeit virtually, in this environment. It's just a matter of a delicate balance that we're all figuring out. So how are we at the Clinton Foundation communicating and reaching supporters? First of all, we have the words, vision, and leadership of President Clinton, which we are significantly grateful for at the foundation. And over the weekend, in fact, he sent a message to our supporters reinforcing really our gratitude for everyone on the front lines right now. And that includes everyday people who are just doing really great things. Our mission always, stemming from President Clinton's first campaign for the presidency in 1992, is put people first. And our storytelling focuses on that too. So we're reaching people with evidence-based information about the epidemic, our programmatic response. We're hoping to lift up and support our members of the community who are on the front lines. And ultimately, we want to share stories of hope. So how do we do this? We do this through partnerships. I'll touch on that in a bit. Through social media, through our web strategy. Sorry, this is a duplicate slide. Through email, through press, and through internal communications. And I want to show you this website we developed. which is really focused on bringing together all the various ways that the foundation is responding, that our partners are responding, that we see people within our community responding, and lifting those up. So I mentioned partnerships. We worked with our early childhood initiative to create a, let's see if this shows up. Here we go. To create a resource kit for parents on activities you can do while indoors. And what we wound up doing is partnering with Univision and a group called Motherly to share it widely. And so you can see Chelsea Clinton did an awesome interview with Motherly to promote these resources and tell parents at the beginning, like, everything you're doing is enough. This is okay. You will get through this. We will be fine. Separately, we have resources for community leaders where we're lifting up what, over here you see what young students are doing through our CGI University platform. Our Clinton Global Initiative partners and Clinton Foundation partners more broadly, like Direct Relief, like World Hope, lifting up their efforts and showing thought leadership and partnership really in this moment. We're not competing for resources. We want to lift up your work because it's so important right now. And we do that as well with our program called the Presidential Leadership Scholars. So we built this web platform to really showcase that. We also, I mentioned this before, lifting up inspiring stories. We just feel like this is a moment for good news stories, and those are really hard to find on the news. So we want to make sure our platforms continue to share those. And so you'll see on here just some amazing things we're seeing on social media, things that are being shared. Like I love this tweet from, we got this note, we're feeding young children and families in Little Rock together with our partner World Central Kitchen and the Little Rock School District. This is one of the notes we got, so we want to lift things like that up. We know there are people, Magali Dress, who is one of our partners in Haiti, is working to sew millions of medical masks. Jose Andres, a presidential leadership scholar who is on the front lines at Brigham Women's ICU. The list kind of goes on, and this is something that we are populating and sharing on our channels every day. So, and then of course, one of the other tactics I'd say is that we have a regular email campaign that we're facilitating that kicked off 2 weeks ago with communications from our CEO, from President Clinton, and from our staff leads across the initiative to say, here's what we're doing and we're thinking of you, and if there's anything you need, let us know. So I think that's pretty much it for me from a presentation standpoint, and I'm happy to just open it up for any questions or walk through anything that folks feel like would be beneficial. One thing I didn't point out, but I wanted to, is our social media platforms. I can bring them up. So we've updated our cover photo, so it's really focused on this moment in time and highlighting the words of President Clinton. You can see we've pinned our resources to the top of this page. And as you go down our feed, you can see what we're doing is ultimately trying to lift up voices and lift up stories that promote facts, positive stories, positive information, and our partners. This is a post about our partner. So, so yeah, I'd encourage you to peruse our channels. You can see here, this is our feeding operation happening in Little Rock right now. So we're highlighting this woman, Karen, who works for the city government, who has been part of the team that's packing 100,000 meals. So we're just trying to put a human face to all of this. Okay, so I'll stop there, Lizra, and I'm happy to answer any questions from this group or walk through anything that might be helpful.
Okay, that's really great, and that was quite insightful, Francesca. We really appreciate this information that you shared. I even got some new ideas on how we could even enhance our social media platform or online content management for DEIC, and we've learned quite a number of lessons. One of the best practices that you mentioned, the use of Canva, that's what we've used to share all the graphics that everyone saw for the Distinguished Speaker Series. So it really works well, it's easy to use, and it is a great tool. And we want to open up the floor for anyone who have any questions, so that Francesca would be able to answer. We would have 20 more minutes on the call, so we'd want to ensure that we answer as many questions that you would have as possible. While we're here, I just want to make mention of a few persons, DIC directors, who are on this call. We have Brenton, we also have Kira Thompson-Ed, we have Daniel, who is our executive assistant, and Lynn, who is supporting us, as well as Maxine Allen Esprit with the IOM Development Fund, International Development Fund. So thank you everyone for participating on this call, and we look forward to answer all your questions. Do you have any feedback on the best practices that have been shared? Are there any that you're using or any that's insightful to you and would encourage you to improve what you're doing currently? Well, while we're waiting for the feedback from others, so Francesca, would you be able to share the presentation as well? I think what we'd want to do is to share with all the attendees via email so that they would be able to see in PDF the information that you shared.
Yeah, I'm absolutely happy to.
Great.
Hi, Liz. We're sorry about that. My hands were a bit dirty. I'm multitasking. Great presentation. Thank you very much for your inputs and insights. I had hoped that the marketing manager from our company might have been able to join, but she was a bit inundated at work today. So I wanted to know if any of the presentation could be shared so I could walk through it with her. And I like it's something you don't normally think of, updating your cover photo. You always think about updating your profile photo. And I like the idea of pinning your resources at the top. That really struck me, especially at this time, because social media is the outlet that everybody's using. So that was a good takeaway for us. Thanks.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide the resources. I'll send them over to Lizra after this call. And I would just note, or actually I can drop a link probably into the chat, so I'll do that. And then Lizra, if you want to send them around. I think the pinning of resources is critical. And I would just note, there is, this is a moment where people are just being so inundated with information. So if you have one message that you want to get across, that when people are seeking information from you, which, everyone's kind of moving at their own pace. So, but when they come to you to find information, pinning your resources, having a clear call to action, whether it's on your website, the first thing they see, if it's related to that, I think is absolutely essentially spoon feeding and acknowledging what your audience wants from you. So pinning resources, featuring it at the top of your website, adapting, maybe it's your Yelp page or your TripAdvisor or whatever it's going to be. Those are essential things to do just to make sure in this moment, when people seek out information from you, they're getting a clear and consistent message.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Francesca. Sorry, my dog is sorry. One last thing, Francesca. On average, how much time do you find, in terms of resources, how much time do you find needs to be committed to your social media outlets, realistically?
I think it depends for each, this might not be helpful, but it really depends on, for each company and for each mission. We have a full team of 2 or 3 people that are dedicated to social media platforms and managing those. And it's a critical part of our communications apparatus. My feeling is that if you identify what your, like a very clear, strong goal in terms of what you want to communicate, it limits how much time you need to focus on differentiating the message from channel to channel to channel. If you kind of just go at it one off, all of a sudden the time really piles up and you can be really overwhelmed with how much there is to do. But if you figure out, okay, I have this clear message and I know I want to get it out on these different Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and through email, it's much easier to manage if you start with what is my message, what do I want to communicate first, and you go into it from there. So realistically, I think to do it well, you should be checking in on it each day. It's more than just posting too. It's responding to, it's seeing how you're being mentioned. Are people replying to you? If they're not, are there ways you can partner with others to get people more engaged or reach out? So it's very much a two-way communication, and I would encourage every day making sure you're spending at least a moment to say, how are we communicating, on what platforms, and is anyone communicating back with us? Because like I said before, the most important thing you can do in this crisis, I think, is listen.
Thank you so much.
Great. We saw 2 hands, Lynn, and then Travis. So Lynn, you'd be able to go now.
Okay, let me commend Ms. Francesca for her awesome presentation. I was really insightful with what she said, and I picked up some key points that I could use on my own platform as well. Okay, you mentioned that what drives the foundation is the people first and the sharing stories. So most of the businesses that operate in Dominica, I realize that sometimes they don't really put their customers first in terms of being so engaged in in their inquiries and so on. So for example, right now in this COVID situation, sometimes you try to call a business place, it's closed, but when you go on their Facebook page, they haven't had any content, or their last content maybe since January. So at that point in time, you kind of feel lost as a customer. So just pushing that forward for DIC and DYBT, that their partners should be engaged with their customers so that everyone can, be up to the times and current affairs.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and certainly we've all experienced that. There's just so many things to do in a day. So maybe Facebook gets left behind, or you forget about it for a couple weeks and then you come back. Like we've all been there before. I think, to my earlier point, because we know information is so critical and everyone is getting it at their own pace, at their own speed, I think it is a missed opportunity for businesses not to update their Facebook page, update wherever they have a public facing presence, to say, like, we acknowledge that this is a really challenging and uncertain situation. Here is what we're doing. If you're doing anything to address it, and open the lines of communication. If you're interested in learning more, email me, reply to this comment, whatever it's going to be. Give them something actionable that they can, or tune in to my virtual event, or whatever it's going to be. Just give them something to do, to that point around promoting action. But I think right now is a really good opportunity, if you haven't updated your social channels, to check in with your audience, make sure everybody's doing okay, and represent your brand, what your brand is doing right now, what your organization, your business is doing right now.
Okay, great. So Travis hand, so Travis would be able to go next. Travis? Yes, hi Travis. Can you hear us? Okay, I think we have a little bit trouble in hearing you, Travis. So if you could type it, then we'd be able to get to you shortly.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, we're hearing you good now. So can you go ahead? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, question I wanted to ask you, in terms of like getting the online getting back to, let's say, for example, you establish an online presence before, but for some reason you dwindle, so you reach to the point where you don't have an online presence anymore. And what would you suggest? What would be the best way to go about engaging your clients, like your previous people, from the people that you engaged with before, and how to engage with like new people? What would be your best advice to go about doing that?
So just to summarize, is the question, if you don't have an online presence right now, what is the best approach for engaging your customers?
Well, not just that you don't have it right now. No, it's not that you don't have it, it's that you don't have it right now. So it's, you had it before. So it's in terms of, you're talking about trust and like consistency. So it reached a point where you break down, so you kind of break that trust and break that consistency with your clients, and you want to now rebuild.
Yeah. Well, I would say I think now is a perfect time, again, to reconnect with your audience in a very human way. And so whether that is an email message that goes out to kind of reintroduce yourself and just acknowledge that we're all going through this extraordinarily difficult moment, but you are part of the community and you ultimately want to serve others within the community and be there. I think there's no better way to or better moment really to reestablish that connection than right now. And we're finding that certainly we're pretty consistent in how we communicate with our audience. People right now are really lonely and they're scared, and they're searching for communities and the ties that bind us. And I think if you feel like there's a natural fit for you to reach out to your base and your audience, then now's the moment just to say, hi, we're still here, we're thinking of you. And if you can use it as an opportunity to learn more. If there's anything we can do to better help you, serve you, support you, whatever, please let us know.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for this question, Travis, and for answering, Francesca. I know we have a few more moments left, but we have a few more questions via the chat. Liz Lassa indicated that she's unable to raise her hand, but she had a point, and then we go to Maxine, and then we take a few questions on the chat. So, Liz Lassa?
Thank you, Lizra. Thank you very much, Francesca. That was excellent. I really appreciated your focus on that mission, and it really allowed me to brainstorm on how, as a hotel, we can focus on that mission and be able to pivot successfully. My question was around advertisements I've seen on the news that are companies focusing on thanking, let's say, healthcare workers, but in the same time marketing their business. Have you had any use of that or seen any statistics around if that's successful, or if people do see it as a more negative approach as you're pushing yourself into their space? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can cut both ways, and it's really a judgment question at the end of the day. In fact, right before I jumped onto this call, there was an article circulating in the Times, and I'm happy to drop it into the chat or send it to Lizra, about how PR companies are continuing to pitch various products that are very strange. Like, during these challenging times, you'll feel better if you buy these pink pairs of floral shoes, and so there's a significant judgment question that we all need to ask ourselves if we're wading into the world of advertising. I've seen it done really well. For example, I think Nike has done a tremendous job advertising, and if you go to their social platforms, you can see some of what they're promoting. CNN is advertising this moment really well in terms of they're focusing on facts. I've seen there's a bunch of car companies right now that are advertising to say, we're going to press pause on loans and requiring loan payments, and we're here for you. Like, ultimately the message is, this is a difficult time. We are going to do our best to make sure that you can survive and sustain without feeling the burden of whatever it is, loans, payments, whatnot, for your car. So I feel like there are companies that are doing it well, that are putting their customers first and using that as the lens to communicate with their audience. Then I feel like there are companies that are doing it horrendously. And like, for example, I keep seeing an ad on television for furniture and how now's the moment to buy your best furniture. And it just, that's a very unusual approach. So my, and it's just poor taste. And there have been other things that are just in poor taste. And I'm happy to circulate this around. But I think when it comes to paid advertising, just be, if you wade into that world, I would suggest workshopping it before you go live with it. Like, reach out to a trusted group of advisors that will give you honest feedback before you publish an ad or anything, because it's such a fine line between appropriate and inappropriate. And if you're wondering if this is inappropriate, the answer is probably don't do it. And that's okay too. Ultimately, it's okay to take a knee, and it's okay to not have your most aggressive communications during this time. The most important thing is that you're authentically communicating in a way that feels right, and I would say consistent and not abusive at this time, because we just know that there's just so much information. So that's my general feeling on advertising right now. I hope that speaks a little bit to your question, but I'm happy to follow up with more if there's anything else I can provide on that front.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we move to Maxine. Maxine, we saw your hand, and then we have a few questions on the chat.
Okay, hi guys, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, Francesca, for your presentation. We, as the International Organization for Migration, we serve audiences that are from different backgrounds in terms of, let's say, nationalities, language groups as well, but are potentially extremely vulnerable right now, living in a country that is not theirs and not necessarily being able to understand all of the messages that are out there in the media in terms of, let's say, what you should do if you don't feel well, what are the symptoms that you should be looking out for, just the hand washing guidelines, the curfews that are, all that sort of thing. For me, one of the challenges is using Facebook. Facebook and WhatsApp are our two primary platforms, but Facebook is the one that we have more control over because WhatsApp is more of a viral spreading into the communities. Using Facebook to communicate with the same message with an audience in different languages, so different audiences, the same message. So I wonder, if there's a strategy that you could recommend for that, or maybe you would say Facebook is not the best medium and we should focus otherwise. So I just wanted some guidance on that.
I think while you ask that question, very important question, Maxine, someone asked a question privately, which relates to this, is that how do you see this type of social media management, online content management being different for product-based organizations and service-based organizations? So Maxine, yours would be a service-based organization. So how would that relate differently from service-based organizations to product-based organizations?
Sure. So I think when it comes to having the challenge of just different users speaking different languages and knowing that that everyone's just as vulnerable in this moment, my general, I guess I would approach it from a couple different angles. The first, I think, is to really rely on the visuals. There are so many good critical communications out there that are just visual focused. And I'm happy, Lizra, I will send you those. I think CDC puts some out. as well as some great organizations who focus on visual communications and how you communicate something that universally speaks around washing your hands or around covering your face or something along those lines. So I think now's the moment, especially when it's coming to those basic needs, basic safety items, to reach these audiences. I really couldn't stress the importance of visual communications anymore. The other thing I'd say is cdc.gov, WHO, I feel like I can't speak for certain, but I do think there are resources translated into many different languages there. And so my feeling is you can, now's a moment where the internet is the collective commons, and everything that's out there that promotes the public good is for use. So use those resources from the CDC, use the resources from the WHO, find visual communications. Those can be extraordinarily helpful. And given that you mentioned WhatsApp, I would also just suggest knowing who maybe who your influencers are within that WhatsApp or within that Facebook group. If you know you have different people who are pretty influential or who can essentially, by posting a message, help convince people to act a certain way, I might elevate those people as a messenger for you to get out the important message in any language, and just help to bridge that divide. So those are a couple strategies that I would suggest. I'm not sure if Facebook is the right medium, but it sounds like you have an audience there and you want to be communicating with them. So I would continue to do so. But I might look to other organizations for resources and tools for just evidence-based, helpful information that you can share.
Okay, great. I saw Julie Robbins' question. Would you suggest adding a social media action plan when developing your crisis management plan?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Social media, just like communicating with the media, just like communicating through advertising or however you choose to communicate, social it's a reality of life right now, and it's part of any good crisis communications plan.
Okay, great. And we have from Jay Versil. And what metrics do you use in measuring your success, the success of your social media campaign for your business? And also, what channels do you think are most relevant for, or what type of business? I tried to find out what type of business they have. I'm not sure as yet, but how do you use each channel differently? So what metrics do you use to measure the success of your social media campaign?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there are quantitative metrics like how many people are liking your post, resharing or retweeting your post, commenting on your post. Those metrics are great, and they can help you understand the success of your content over time. There are also softer indicators. So for example, I think it's a win if you haven't posted on Facebook or on your social platforms or on your website or wherever you communicate in a few months. It's a win to post. It's a win to update your community, and that should be a marker of success for you, especially in this moment. I find meaningful engagement, people commenting, people responding, myself being able to like or respond to something. I find that to be an incredibly important metric of success. But it's just a matter of balancing it's not necessarily how many likes you get. It's a combination of how many likes are you getting, how many reshares, how many comments, and what do those comments say? Are you actually engaging your community? Are you communicating with them in a meaningful way? And I think you will see that from response in your community pretty quickly, whether this is something that's resonating. And so my main indicator is how are we facilitating our social platforms as a conversation, not just using it as a mouthpiece to get out information, or not just as essentially a microphone to share what we want to say, but really using it as two-way communication so that we're hearing what our audience has to share with us.
Okay, great. That was very good content. We have 5 minutes past time, and I know that we said we are here for an hour, but we just got one more comment or question. Antonio said, thanks to the organizers for this eye-opening discussion. So often in our drive to be marketable and competitive, we often make the mistake of putting the business and profits to the front burner, but this evening we're reminded to essentially put people first. Ms. Valda also said, this was a very informative program. Thank you so much, DIC, Francesca, the Clinton Foundation, and DYBT, and IOM, IDF. During this presentation, some new ideas came through and the tools provided are very useful. Blessings aplenty. So thank you so much for this. And Francesca, we really appreciate the time that you took to share these best practices with us, some of the best practices in your community, things you've seen that worked really well, that can inspire us to use this time, even though it's a crisis for us, it's a really challenging time. All of us here on the call, even DIC as a business support organization, we've learned a lot so that we can help to serve our community better. And one of the last things you mentioned, it's a conversation, not a microphone. So it's not just sending information and darting it at persons, but seeing how we can engage people in order to meet their needs at this time. You also shared some important tools, so I hope that we'll all be able to use the tools. And maybe for those who are on the call, if you think that you need more support in how to use these tools, maybe we could have a follow-up webinar sometime in the future. Maybe someone could be recommended through the Clinton Foundation or otherwise, where we get to help you in navigating these tools to be able to optimize how you use them. I think we got, okay, Francesca, you sent the presentation link, so everyone, you'd be able to click the link so that you can access the presentation. I would like to say thank you again, Francesca. I mean, I said it before, but we're closing now, so thank you for this insightful presentation. Thank you to Luke for introducing us to Francesca, because you said, okay, you have the best person for this topic, and it was really an awesome individual that you selected for this. The DYBT and IOM, International Development Fund, thank you also for helping us get insight into the topics that would be useful for entrepreneurs. And we thank everyone on the call, because without you here engaging us, this would not have been as impactful as we hoped it would have been. So thank you, everyone. All the best. Keep safe. And we hope to see awesome examples of how you've implemented these tools in having successful online content and social media management. All the best, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
You're welcome.
Okay, good afternoon. Bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks for the opportunity.
You're most welcome.
Thank you so much. Came on late, but I still grasped quite a bit.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for the link.
You're most welcome. Giving the link now to ensure that everyone gets it subsequently.
Awesome, awesome.